Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Gig Harbor City Council study session of Thursday, November 3rd, 2022. The time is 2:03 p.m. and I will do a roll call. Councilmember Denson is on her way and I'll acknowledge her when she gets here. Councilmember Rodenberg is excused, and then I will go from my far left. Councilmember Barber. Here. Councilmember Henderson.
Here.
Councilmember Likens. Here. Councilmember Storsett.
Here.
Councilmember Wood. Here. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And welcome to the people joining us in the audience today in person, and also welcome to those that are watching online. And Josh, are you there? Well, when he gets back, I'll have him. Or do you have the computer down? Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so we'll just move right into our first discussion item, which is our 2023-2024 budget discussion. And I will turn it over to our city administrator, Katrina Knudsen.
Thank you, Mayor. Prior to starting on this item, I do believe we have an agenda, an amendment to the agenda. Is that correct,
okay.
Josh and Jeff?
Oh, yes. I do that.
The 38th Avenue discussion is being proposed to move to the December 2nd meeting in December. We have some staff out currently that would add value to the discussion.
Oh, yes,
And
okay.
therefore, we're proposing to bump 38th Street discussion to that meeting in December.
Any objections from council on that? Okay, so we'll move it to that next meeting. All right, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, council, for your hard work with all of our staff for the budget process. I know it was a lot of information to digest. So after you've had a moment to consider all of the budget requests that we asked for and answered a lot of your questions, wanted to bring the whole leadership team around the table today to be able to answer any of your questions holistically prior to making a final package going forward for the public hearing on, I believe, November 12th. You did not have an updated budget document for today. That is because we wanted to ensure that we received formal comments from you today prior to going forward with that draft. However, it will be posted prior to the November 12th hearing so that the public can see that and have it in time to review and subsequently come testify at the public hearing if that is their desire. There were adjustments that have been made, however, to the document subsequent to our meeting, including some grammatical issues and some formatting issues that were noted, as well as an adjustment, I believe, to the port. The incorrect version was put into the original one, so I believe Dave made those adjustments. And there were several as well in Public Works. Jeff, I don't know if you'd like to say what those are now.
Sure. I mean, I'll just go over what we talked about last time. But I have that on top. There it is. So we were able to go through and we looked at the operating capital funds. Quick overview in the parks operating, we had a narrative to talk about the native trees. Again, that was funded in the spreadsheet itself, but there wasn't a goal identified, so we added that. We in streets operating, we had the parking standards. We included goals for ADA parallel parking stalls to be added into the streets operating goals. And then in the streets operating also, we added last one was there. Oh, there was a North Harborview sidewalk ADA improvements. That was moved into the 23-24 budget because it was not completed in 2022. So we carried that forward. And then in water operating, we moved the variable frequency drive project into 2023-24. And source metering also, it was not new, but we did add it in that we had it in the dollar amount, and it was just noted in there to be very specific. Wastewater operating, there was a specific question related to electric vehicles. And what was the electric vehicle that was purchased this year? And so Chuck, I don't know if you want to say what that vehicle was?
It was a Polaris UTV electric vehicle just for working up and down the plant maintenance.
Okay. It's like a mini pickup truck.
It's like a mini pickup truck, yeah, bringing equipment from lower into the plant.
You're able to charge it at the wastewater treatment plant?
I'm sorry?
You're able to charge it at the wastewater?
Yes.
treatment plant?
And then also we added the Parks Capital 6-year CIP table and the Streets Transportation Capital 6-year CIP table. So those are now in the document.
Thank you, Jeff.
And I think we talked about the public works standard. You were going to add traffic calming
Yeah,
so that it shows in the budget.
yes.
Thank you very much.
And then Dave had a number of just minor cleanup things. Dave, I don't know if you'd like to describe
Sure.
those now or.
And Councilmember Rook, thank you. You jogged me to look at this. We had suspended transfers from the general fund in 22. There was a transfer to the strategic operating fund of $1 million and a transfer for 50,000 to the equipment fund. We removed those from the general fund in order to balance the budget this year, because remember, the ending balance in the general flows in the beginning for next year. However, we showed those as incoming still in the two receiving funds, so I pulled those out. So what you'll see is a corresponding decrease in the beginning of the strategic reserve and the equipment rental by $1 million strategic reserve and 50,000 equipment rental. And then during the discussions, I checked my budget detail. We were talking about the parks operating and the transfer to the arts committee. And I believe there was a $35,000 grant budget item, and then there was a $7,500 item for, I forget what it was, but it ended up 42.5 for each year was requested to go to the arts. And I didn't have it in the numbers. We had it in the narratives. I put that into the numbers, so you'll see those numbers change a little bit. That's the extent of what I had to change.
The senior center funding, did that?
That was in there.
Okay.
Oh, and you brought that up, Councilmember Henderson. Yes, I fixed that too. The senior center, I believe I had it going out, but I didn't have it going into the senior center.
Okay, good.
And then so the senior center is made healthy with that. That was $100,000 transfer.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we had that going out, I believe, in 22. And I think I failed to put it in my I failed to put it in the seniors fund. I had it going out in the general, but not in.
So the current balance is 200,000 plus.
Yes, it's what you expect it to be.
Okay, good, thanks.
Yes.
Appreciate that.
So what is the strategic reserve balance now?
It'll be about 2 million. It's $1 million less than what I had in it here.
It's about 3.5, I think, in the budget, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it'd be 2.5.
Okay.
Just take a
And are you feeling that that's enough for us?
I do. Reason I do is we just bought that property and we're in the process of getting bonds for it. And so we're going to be reimbursing ourselves with that 4.2 million. And the real estate excise taxes are up pretty well this year. Not that I expect them to stay really high next year and the year after, but we're doing pretty well right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's one other item. There was questions regarding the Art History Museum funding. And we'll get to part of that in the LTAC discussion that comes next, but just for clarity of what's in the budget currently. Council previously authorized $150,000 for each year for 3 years to go to their capital campaign for the Shenandoah. So that has been included in the budget. Previously, and I'm saying this more for edification because there was a little confusion in case you hear something from the community. Our attorney in reviewing that indicated there needed to be public benefit for the $450,000. So we had prepared an agreement, sent that to the Harbor History Museum. They came back and said that there's an RCW that allows for municipalities to provide general fund money to historical organizations without the requirement for the public benefit to come back to us. And so that is something that we want to discuss with the council. We can request public benefit. For instance, the city has provided $30,000 to the History Museum over the last, I believe, 4 years. which in turn the History Museum has not charged admittance fees for anyone. That agreement with the History Museum sunsets at the end of December, and we do not currently have a request from them to re-up that $30,000. You will see it in the LTAC presentation that Laura will give next, that we are recommending that if council does wish to give that additional funding to the History Museum, that operating money would come out of LTAC funds, as it's a more appropriate avenue to come out of that fund versus a general fund expenditure. So that is currently how the budget is set up. The current agreement that we have in front of the History Museum was requesting free admission for a period of 15 years for the $150,000. Now, Daniel has agreed with the History Museum in that we are not required to receive a public benefit for this expenditure that council requested. So today it would be great if there could be some discussion if council is okay with that $450,000 going unencumbered without public benefit, or if you would like for staff to work with the History Museum to have some form of public benefit.
So we actually voted on this 2 years ago, that 450 was to go to them as a matching fund for the grant that they were getting from somewhere else. And I don't understand why we're looking at it again, because it was already voted on by a former council. So I think we should honor that vote and continue on with that matching grant money that they to begin.
Thank you, Councilmember. The vote was to provide this for matching funds. However, in looking at how we give that money, that was not decided at that meeting, whether or not it was going to be if we would require a public benefit back or not. So the funding is available and ready for them. But with this council noting that it's the expenditure going into this budget, we're just requesting that, and it's fine if the decision is still that, we just need to know, because from a staff perspective, it really is a policy decision.
So I'm in favor of having it go to them unencumbered.
The money that they have been receiving from us the previous years, they have been giving a public benefit for that as free admission.
Correct.
I guess I would like that to continue.
So just to clarify, that $30,000 you'll see in the LTAC, again, this is the next budget, or the next item, but we've included that $30,000 for free admission as coming out of LTAC funds in the
so
next
this
2
is
years.
different than
Correct. And you as
So
council are
Four
fully
fifties
within
towards the Shenandoah, sorry.
450, yes,
Yeah.
for the capital campaign to match.
How
their
would it
grant.
even be said that it's a public benefit? Then what would be the angle of saying that?
The public benefit, and I apologize, they don't have the RCW in front of me right now, perhaps Josh could pull it up, but it does stipulate that for purposes of historic preservation, that cities can give money to museums for furtherance of its local history.
And I guess, Yeah.
I would support giving that for what you just stated. So for preserving history.
yeah, I would agree with that, stating it that way, that, and I guess to me, I didn't realize it was going to the Shenandoah, I guess I missed that, I was getting confused. But to me, restoring the Shenandoah is a public benefit in and of itself.
Okay, but yeah, I'm getting the two mixed up a little bit, so.
Yeah,
So
Me
I know we're
too,
gonna hit it more
That's
on the
what-
LTAC, but yeah, I
Well,
understand what you're saying.
And it is a little bit confusing in working with the History Museum. There's the capital funds that go toward the actual building itself, and then there's the operating cost, which is what they're requesting from LTAC. And so it is complicated. But at least right now, we have the $150,000 that will be paid this year once we have the agreement signed, and it sounds like we have an agreement from council that we will not request anything in return. We'll rely on that state law that allows us to make that funding available. And then we can continue the discussion with the LPAC money in the next agenda item.
Will we still get a report from them on what the money?
Yes, we'll still have an agreement, and so we generally, the terms of that, the ones that we were not in agreement were where we were requesting free admission for 15 years. And so we will strike that language based on council's decision today and go forward with the rest. For instance, they have to be a history museum for a certain amount of years, or else we get some, our funding back. So, but that will come forward for council ratification.
And this money is designated, now I'm trying to make sure that I really do understand, this money is designated for the Shenandoah project and part of a matching grant.
Yeah.
Correct,
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a, I believe a federal matching grant.
Yeah.
That
okay,
they needed our funds to secure. Great.
Yeah.
Well, that was the last wrap up from us. As you can see, as I said, we have the whole leadership team here. And if there are any questions from council, we just wanted to make sure that you were well prepared going into the public hearing on, keep getting mixed up.
the
It's
14th.
14.
Thank you. The 14th, not the 12th. We will be off that day. So feel free to ask any questions that you may have.
So I just wanted to, is this a good time to kind of bring up a proposed addition?
Just first, I'd like to recognize Councilmember Denson has arrived.
Absolutely.
There she is. There she is. All right,
Yeah.
go ahead, Councilmember.
Yes, thank you. So, I've talked with a couple people, about, and several council members, and, with the, city administrator, Henningsen, about the possibility of introducing a housing and human services. And I would not propose taking away or out of the police budget. I think the way you have the 4 officers going into the 4 squads and, you know, the way you laid it out, which was so well done, donuts included, was really good. And so I was asking Katrina, how could we incorporate this position? So what this position would be in the city of Hillsborough, does this, sent it to a couple people, is it would be an overall housing, health and human services, where they could look at affordable transitional housing, working with community development, looking at grant funding for the possibility of an alternative response team under a grant, which would be mental health professionals that would go out to assist the fire department, the police department. They could also work with public works, working on low income utility, working on, if they find needles in the park, cleanup, you know, emphasis. They can work with the school district doing educational efforts. They have a very successful program in Goldsboro. There is a possibility, I know I've pulled up some research, AWC has provided grant funding for ultimate response teams. They could also be a conduit for all of our community support services, from the Fish Food Bank to Harbor Hope Center, to, you know, all the different places that help provide people who are food or housing insecure within our community. They could also work, you know, with an emphasis on youth and senior activities. There's all kinds of ways that this has been modeled. There's a lot of different models throughout. So I've talked with Katrina about the possibility, and you can talk more about it if you wouldn't mind, about what the salary would be. Could we fund this for 2 years, starting with this department director, use part of the opiate money, because they would be doing education and things on opiate, and then seek grants to fund it in the long term? That this would be something we would start up, get them going, but there are a lot of grants for these types of services. And I know the one I believe in Postville is not fully grant funded. So I'm just curious, I've gotten some positive feedback from several council members, and so I'd be curious to hear your feedback about what you think about this potential program. And if Katrina, you wouldn't mind first talking about how it could work within the budget.
Yeah, so Councilmember Lyons brought this up to me, and I've had a chance to review the Paulsbo job description as well as the salary, which of course we would need to, if we were to put this position within our budget, we would need to run it through Shannon's team and do a full salary analysis. The Paulsbo job, I believe, is 82,000 to 109. So it would be that type of expenditure. It would likely be a non-represented exempt position. Not sure where it would be located yet. If council authorizes that, because it's so new, we're not sure exactly where it would be located. to be honest. We want to make sure that it's something that council wishes prior to, or we have authorization to look at prior to the executive team determining salary and location of the position. But I was able to talk with some folks up in Paulsbo in advance of today, just seeing if it's working, how it fits with police, community development, public works, and they love the position. It was a kind of a resounding tons of support, specifically planning, like, thank goodness, there's somebody that can focus on kind of this part of that work. As well as a lot of support for our police, and even being able to be a conduit of information or assistance. So again, I'm sure there's pros and cons to all of this. In terms of budget wise, talked with the finance director, and we can situate that within the budget, noting that we'll receive about $10,000 to $11,000 a year for the next 17 years, and that money could be funneled into this position. I do like the that the grant or the position would be funded by grants long-term, as not being to reduce the administrative overhead of bringing on another position. I think that is value added, and the Paulsbo position is fully grant funded, which was good to hear. So that's the information that I can provide. Again, this is a council decision, because it was not, well, the budget is all your decision, but it was not included in our proposed budget.
So the 82 to 109,000, that's not a fully burdened rate, right?
Yeah, we would add probably 38% onto that for the city's benefit package.
And would there need to be a vehicle?
Well, we have an administration vehicle. It all depends where it lands. There's an administration vehicle that can be utilized, I believe. Community development has vehicles, so at this point, we would not anticipate that.
Can we hear from our police chief?
Of course,
Thank you.
Thank you. We haven't explored this notion fully in-house yet, and it could look like many things. I met with the former Paulsbo, they called it navigator at that point. And they performed functions that we already have access to in some part, and specifically the co-responder program, which in Pierce County is grant funded. So we already have those available and we utilize them. In Paulsbo, I believe that person took the role of that co-responder. So in
No,
just,
it's a separate team. It's a separate team.
Okay.
They have, it's called the Police Navigator Program. They don't do the Police Navigator work. That
Okay.
is done by the county funds. So Kitsap County, and it's separate, and it's shared with two other cities, Bremerton.
there was one, right?
And Bainbridge.
What did catch my attention about that position is that she focused on reducing recidivism in municipal court. And that seemed to be the most appealing part of the job, at least from my perspective. Now, we also throw in things like transitional housing and some other things that might more adequately appropriately fall in the planning role, community development role. So I'm not sure where this position would land. I think we need to vet out exactly what tasks we would need them to do before we do that.
Okay, Council Peterson.
Brenda and I have talked about this quite a bit, and I'm fully supportive of it. To me, it's a indication of how much we've grown as a city in a good way, in that we're starting to have lots of programs that are helping other people and helping those in need. And I'm also starting now to hear, well, the Waterfront Alliance has this program, and the chamber was going to do the exact same thing. And they found out that they were doing, if we had some, that they were both doing the same thing. We need a coordinator to make sure that we're taking care of everybody, but also that we all know what each other is doing. And so I see it as being, as helping you guys, helping planning, helping public works. It's kind of a cross-departmental thing. The other aspect that I really like about it is that I see this person being a liaison to some of our nonprofit organizations and potentially freeing up, yes, some of the city administrator and some of the mayor's time, so that they don't have to be the only ones who are doing this. Not that none of the rest of our staff are going to community meetings, but if we have somebody who's designated as the point person, I was involved in United Way in Anchorage when we started this type of program in Anchorage, and what we did was it enabled at the time, 7 different toy drives at Christmas time and food drives to move under one roof. Because you didn't need all 7 of them because they were duplicating efforts, and by putting them all together, the services went a lot further because you didn't have as much staff. You still had the same amount of need, but it was all consolidated into one. So I can see some really, really wonderful things about this. And to me, it supports our overall goal of being an all-inclusive and wonderful city that everybody wants to live in.
I was just gonna add, I think it's key that this person work with both the police and the fire department closely to figure out, do we need a navigator program? Are the resources available? Adequate? You know, developing what that would look like, what would work for you, seek out grant funding for that, or tie into the Pierce County, the taxing that funds the responder teams in Pierce County. Maybe working with them, they could be a conduit liaison, but that would be key. I mean, that would be key to this program.
Well, I'm interested in seeing this program and investigating what our needs are. I'm wondering, since there are definite requirements on using this opioid funding, whether or not this would fall underneath the opioid amount that we're going to be getting. If they're going to be working with nonprofits and other things, that's my concern is the budget right now.
And Councilmember Wu, thank you so much for asking your question prior to today. Because you did that, we were able to ask Daniel Kenny, and he did look through that, and this would be eligible for that.
Okay.
It's a small portion of the overall amount that
Yeah.
we're talking about, $100,000 plus 38% benefits. It's a pretty huge gap. And it's like dropping the bucket really that it goes towards. I'd be curious to learn more. I'm not, I guess, convinced that this is like the right solution at this point. I think the fact that we already have community groups that are eyeing this, I think it's still possible that they work together to come up with a solution that doesn't require a staff member. I also worry about, how it impacts Chief Busey's department or fire department as well of, knowing who's responsible kind of for what programs are already out there. And I just learned about it about half an hour ago, so not anybody's fault, but of this suggestion. So I wanted to hear more, but at this point, I would definitely want to see more of a job description. What has worked in Fallsville, what is not, and then we can learn things from that. But is it a full-time employee as well, or is this something where I think we can lean back on our community to maybe provide more leadership in the area?
I will add, the position, there is a lot of grant money available to fund the position like this long term, if it does work out. That it would be something I could see the city just funding for a year or two, and then seek out to have it.
I'm very supportive of this. I think that there's a lot of figuring out how they can be most useful, and they might try something, sitting down with the police department, sitting down with the fire department, sitting down with planning. There's a lot of vetting and a lot of figuring out to do, but I think it'd be really valuable if we're seeing increased need, increased mental health, increased substance abuse. I know our officers are meeting with, crazy numbers of homeless people that need services, and if they had somebody that would be helpful in making those connections, maybe not, Chief, you would know better than anybody. I know the fire chief the other day when I was talking to him brought this up in a public forum, their need for more folks, and there are some resources through Pierce County, but not enough for the whole county. So if there's more people that can provide some of those direct referrals and connecting the services, I think it's really beneficial. And I think it'll be something that we'll try too. Some things may work, some things may not. Maybe they'll work with other departments, or some departments more than others. But I think it's worth trying, and it's the direction a lot of communities are going in. And like you said, I think we can find grant money for it. And when we're interviewing people, I would suggest hopefully finding somebody with some grant writing experience. It's not a requirement of the job description, but a lot of these folks, if they've been in human and social services, are used to funding their own position.
And they know where the grants are.
And they know where the grants are, and they could be really helpful, because if somebody's ultimately got to write those grants, and that's more staff time.
So I think we're gonna have to be careful if we're gonna put this person with the fire department, who also operates on the peninsula. If this is city funds, how do we I mean, I think this is one of the questions that needs to be answered. How do we make sure that city funds go to city projects and don't go to county projects?
That's a really good point. We have a really good relationship, as our building official, fire marshal, can attest to, with the fire department currently doing our business check inspections for fire. And so we're able to track that to make sure that we're not paying for the unincorporated Pierce County inspections, but I definitely agree that there would need to be some sort of arrangement that it would be within city.
I'd like to see this come back at mid-year, maybe after we do a little bit more research and make sure that we have answered these questions, that there's a need, and how we're gonna make sure where this money goes and what kind of, I'd like to hear from the human services person, what kind of person are we looking for? That's what I'd like to see. I'm very interested in this happening, but I'd like to have some, and I'd like to have more information. And I don't want it to go over to the next budget session. I'd like to see it happen before the next budget session. So if we could do something in a couple of months after we've done some more vetting, and so this is the kind of person we're looking for. We can make sure that our money stays within the city, and this is how we'll do that, and make sure that there is a need for this. That's what I would like to see.
That is definitely possible. I know that mid-year, at the mid-budget point, we'll be looking to see if we can accommodate a fifth officer within our budget. We could add this to the budget now with the anticipation that we would not hire until mid-year after all of this is figured out. And that goes to a discussion that I had with Shannon, Kelly, Dave, and Jeff this morning about, and this is one of the topics, just as we're trying to come up to speed with this, we want to make sure that it's going to serve the departments as well. So definitely want to get Kelly, Jeff, Carl's feedback into this to ensure that the job is how it will fit into Cape Harbor, not necessarily just taking a Palco job description and assuming it's going to fit here. So that time, I guess what I'm saying is I would agree with that if this is council's direction, that we would add it in and then have a work team to look at and report back to council on how it would fit here.
Yeah, I like that idea.
I like that idea a lot.
Councilmember Storrs, did that get to some of your concerns?
Yeah, I think that giving it some time to be able to look into it a little bit further. But, yeah. Fine with going further and not fully decided.
I will
Fair
say, I did a cursory look at grant funding that would be available to fund this position. I've done a fair amount of grant funding to write for programs that we brought into the hospital or the community. And a lot of it requires that it be a city that take the lead. And they're not looking for health department, county, school district, fire department. They are looking for cities to take the lead to serve the city, because that's where the majority of people live. And that's where housing prices are going up the most, which is a direct correlation to things. That is the number one correlation. And our housing prices, as we just heard on our excise tax report, are healthy. For sure. Okay, thank you. I
It sounds like
appreciate
we have
all
enough
the feedback.
support for your recommendation to put that into the draft, and we'll ensure that it's done so that we don't look to hire prior to mid-budget with analysis and work with the executive team coming back to the council for review prior to going forward.
You got an idea where it's gonna go in the budget and how much we're gonna throw at it for now?
Well, we didn't want to do that work until we knew if it was going to be supported by the council, so we're going to be working together to put that together.
I appreciate all the feedback. I think this could be a really good thing. Really do. I think how we care for the most vulnerable in our city, to me, is the greatest mission.
And I know I've gotten questions, I don't know if the rest of the council member have, but I've gotten questions like, who do I call for assistance at the city? Where's your human service department? Oh, we don't have one. So I think people are expecting some degree, even if it's just a connector and a referral person, something.
Yeah.
We met with Heather, I don't want to belabor this, but Heather Moss, the Director of Health and Human Services for Pierce County, her and her team came in and met with the mayor and I, and it was kind of, well, who can we contact for these things? And it doesn't totally fit with the chief, and it doesn't totally fit with planning, and so, potentially could fill that need, but again, we'll need to make sure that the organization will set it up to be beneficial to our city. Are there any other questions that council has prior to us pushing this forward to public hearing? If
Great
not,
job and easy to understand.
Yeah.
Thank you. I can say that.
I have that 3 o'clock deadline, so if there's any police related matters, do we need to address those first or?
would you have anything?
No, I did know there's questions from the council.
No.
Okay.
No.
Yes, Kelly and Shannon have a civil service commission today at 3. So. Let's see, we're gonna wrap up ahead of time, maybe. Thank you, Councilmember Wood, for acknowledging the staff. I know that it was a different budget this year and but I mean, all the staff did such a great job, especially give a shout out to the Public Works team and to Dave, noting that most of those pages involve something that you had to work on. So really appreciate, stepping up to the plate and coming up with this more, I think, understandable, easily digestible document for the residents to hopefully be able to see this is what the city's focusing on with their tax dollars. So really well done.
It's very well done.
Yeah. Dave, do you have any last words for us?
Well, what I heard, you're gonna see the first of this position in the budget next, or on the 14th. And it'll be in the budget. We're attempting to hand out a corrected version or as most up to date as we can get it. I can promise you in all my years of doing it, we're not gonna nail it as to what we'll print in December, but we're gonna do our darndest and to correct everything. And we're trying to get it to you next Thursday, so you'll have it for the weekend before the Monday public hearing. And the position will probably be in the general fund. I guess to start, we'll put it under administration and we're looking at probably about 140,000 in salary. Yeah, salary benefits. And it'll be in administration, and just rest assured from what I'm hearing, you probably will see some tweaking of this position if necessary in the mid-biennial review, which the state law requires us to do it next year, but we can't do it any sooner than September 1st, and it has to be accomplished before December 31st. So if the need should be that we have to meet early in September to accommodate this position or something else, we'll do that. And we'll just knock it out in September, but it'll come up next year, probably in the mid-biennial review. That's all I have.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Dave and council. This is great. Looking forward to seeing this on the 14th. If there's any staff that would like to exit at this point, feel free.
Oh,
Feel free. Thank you for being here, everybody.
Take care.
Maybe we'll sing to you next time.
Okay. Yes.
Dodge the bullets.
Yes.
Thank you.
Must be your lucky day.
I think we need to hire a vocal coach for the, no,
I don't know.
just kidding. Just kidding.
The last time we did it in person, it was good.
It was, it
On
actually was pretty
Zoom, nobody can, you can't hear anything. It's so it's like, oh my God, that's horrible.
good. Well, we tried,
We need a metronome.
right, right, and a pitch pipe.
Well, then
Sorry,
that's
sorry,
starting
no.
out to get more too.
And no,
It's Lord over later on.
that's right. Okay.
You're here. We can.
Yeah, that's what Stacy said too.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to discussion item number 2, the review of our 2023 lodging tax grant recommendation. We're moving on to item 2. Thank you. No worries. Again, this is the review of our 2023 lodging tax grant recommendations, and this will be a report by Katrina Kiedson, our city administrator, and communication and tourism director, Laura Pettit.
And I will defer to our tourism and communications director for the presentation.
Wonderful, great.
I will refer back some of your
Yeah.
points. But as we all know, the process to award lodging tax funds happens annually. The city is also required to apply. And these funds are very specific in what they can be used for under 4 specific pillars. And those are tourism marketing, marketing and operations of special events and festivals designed to attract tourism, operations and capital expenditures for tourism related facilities owned or operated by a city or a public facilities district, including repayment of bonds and revenue bonds for eligible capital projects. And then the operation of tourism related facilities owned or operated by nonprofits, but not their capital expenditures. So very, very specific. And each year we get a good amount of applications. This has increased tenfold in the last 2 to 3 years. The amount we have given away in grants has increased tenfold over the last few years. So looking at that, this year in September, LTAC met and reviewed 22 applications, which is, I think, an all-time high. 1 application was ineligible because it was from a for-profit operation, and clearly there are 4 very distinct categories. So we have those available for viewing, of course, and we also have recommendations given by the committee for how they would like to fund those. As you know, you are also the body that reviews those recommendations and can accept those or modify them. Our budget estimates about 1.6 million in the fund, and this would leave a balance, an ample fund balance, essentially. The total recommended award was around 717,000.
Wasn't it 1.2 something?
It's estimated with the amount we'll take in 23. So that's been fairly consistent. We've grown that a little bit, and that's been at about 120% to 150% of previous years, year over year.
No, I was saying that you said 1.717, that's the LTAC recommendation.
Yes.
But the suggested one by the staff is 1.2 something.
Yes, we'll get to that just in a moment here.
All
But good eye, and that's why we're
No,
here.
I know.
We have a couple of modifications that we are recommending from the staff perspective. And one of those has to do with the places that funds are coming from and allocating them out of LTAC instead of the general fund, as City Administrator to a certain extent mentioned, is a more appropriate application of funding. And the first under that is for the Downtown Waterfront Alliance. There was 35,000 provided for operations, and I believe that was from general fund. Yes, yes. And there were 2 events that were funded from LTAC, and those were both the Girls Night Out and the Waterfront Farmers Market. So the Downtown Waterfront Alliance was getting funds from 2 different funds, from LTAC and from general fund. Under this, we propose that we combine those under only LTAC. That money comes from LTAC. We also added an additional 15,000. We recommend keeping that funding level for 2023. And that is due to increase in operation capital and funding, the agreement with coming from LTAC funds. So this amount that we're recommending joins all of the things that we'd fund for them. So that's $50,000 in operations. That was previously from the general fund and their Girls Night Out program, and then $20,000 for the Farmers Market program. In our updates, we've learned that they still operate the Waterfront Farmers Market at a loss, $13,900. So we recommend covering that amount as well, noting that it is one of our great summer tourism draws, and it really paints a picture of who we are. The total allocation is recommended at $100,000, and that breaks down through operations of Farmers Market. And that's
Or if I may, and that fund, and it's described in here, maybe you were getting to it, that if those funds qualify for the BNO reimbursement that Dave applies for a couple times a year. And so the $100,000, if that's what we give to them, we would get back 75% of that through our BNO utility tax return.
So we don't pay the state $75,000, is that what you're saying?
Right, so we would be reimbursed for that. So essentially our $100,000 would be actually about $25,000.
And it's only specific, that there's specific rules around that, correct, on that reimbursement. So not all of these would be eligible for that.
Not all of them, just the Downtown Waterfront Alliance.
Okay.
And as I've learned a myriad of things, and I noticed one of our LTAC members here, I've learned so much about LTAC from Laura and our our members, but we are the only state that has this B and O tax reimbursement out of any state in the nation, and so we're really lucky to have this program. There is a cap for how much the organization can give, so or can receive back, and I believe that our Downtown Waterfront Alliance is at $250,000 is what they can receive back from this program. And so in talking with Mary, she's comfortable with $100,000, noting that they still want other agencies or businesses to be able to donate and then receive that refund.
Guess my concern with any of these grants is the extent to which there's a direct correlation between what they're doing, you know where I'm going with this, and heads in bed on all of them. They're all great events, but I think sometimes we lose sight of that, thinking, oh, these are wonderful events. But are they putting people in the hotel rooms, not just day tourists, not just enjoyment for us? Is it really fulfilling the LTAC purpose?
And that will, I guess we can skip ahead of that just a little bit, and go into the allocation that we are recommending for individual grant recipients. We are recommending that we give them across the board reduction to the amount recommended by LTAC to each one of those, and fund at the level that we did in 2022 with a increase for inflation, essentially. So in 2022, we funded $96,500 in event grants. We propose just slightly more this year to adjust for inflation and leaving that at those levels. The amounts that we will keep are the Downtown Waterfront Alliance, the Harbor History Museum, and the city's ask. There is an increased ask from the city, and that is for an additional $500,000 to go directly to the sports complex phase 1B project funding. We've heard from multiple members of our business community. I know City Administrator Newsom's met with several businesses, several hoteliers, several people who would be the recipient of the economic gain from the sports complex, and they all feel that this is a strong draw for tourism, given their the tournament play and the regional draw for that.
This is for phase 1B,
1B,
which
yeah,
is the city part.
correct.
And so I'm struggling. I understand the phase 1A because of the ability to have tournaments and bring people in. Do we think we're going to get a significant draw of people coming to a city park? Phase 1B?
Well, it's more than a part. And here are the other things that are happening, and I've been so lucky this week to go very, very in depth on what's happening with the funding for phase 1A and speaking with the YMCA, which you'll hear on the mayor's podcast out tomorrow, slight plug. But also projects like this are funded through a variety of mechanisms. So with the YMCA going after major gifts, charitable donations, corporate gifts, all of those things are funded through their fundraising. We've committed to that $350,000 for an RCO grant to go toward their fundraising. Also, what the city is doing under phase 1B is covering some of the costs that 1A would incur. So the grading, a lot of the permitting and the bathrooms that would need to be installed as part of phase 1A. There's a lot of work that they're doing on support. Yes, yes, all of those things that would be covered under that Y grant are now kind of shifting to phase 1B, noting that these things being done concurrently is the most efficient way to do it. But I think weigh in, because I know you're both.
Jeff has
I'll just say that there, I mean, the performance stage, that phase 1B is standalone, and we anticipate that it'll be used by not just music performance, but theater performances. So it's going to be able to bring not just a local neighborhood group there, it's going to bring a broader group to the site.
I'm just curious, I mean, I can understand a bit of the LTAC, piece playing into this. I imagine it will bring tourists. Of course, in phase 1A and B, 2 fields does not bring like a soccer tournament. So I could see it being more supported by the community if I guess it was better laid out that we knew we're going to get to phase 2, or like phase 3 is what really brings a tournament, be able to have that many people in one area versus spread out all over. It's just an easier draw. So I'd be curious why $500,000 there for LTAC, and we're cutting a lot of these other smaller organizations that are already doing things right now. And then why not more funding from like our parks and development piece on the sports complex? It just seems like a shift late in the game to say, oh, let's throw LTAC in there.
So an important piece on this is having the benefit of sitting on the executive board for the Downtown Waterfront Alliance and going to a lot of chamber events and hearing from the business community what truly brings people within their doors. There was a gymnastics tournament at the high school a couple of months ago, and our downtown restaurateurs said that it was the single biggest jump since prior to the pandemic. And they were parents coming in for coffee, coming back for lunch, coming in for dinner. And so we regularly heard, and it's backed up by the data, that things that bring people in, tournaments or things like that, are really what increase their business. I will note that there has been a change to the state law regarding LTAC. It's not just heads and beds anymore. It's bringing people here from 50 miles away, regardless if they stay or not, which is one of the considerations. So this recommendation comes forward due to the funding shortfalls that Finance Director Rodenbach talked about. And the council really has a lot of high expenditure asks for this budget. And how are we going to determine that? In my mind, the $500,000 is not tied to the reduction. The council wishes to bring up back to the LTAC recommended asks for everyone else. I guess what I'm saying is I don't see those two things married together. I do really, as we've analyzed this, as you can see, there would still be a remaining ending fund balance if we were to bring everyone whole. And so we really brought this forward just to show council what our recommendation would be based on what last year's funding was, noting that we did want a fund balance left over in case council did want to spend some additional funds on a project that would bring in tourists. So I think the council could make a recommendation to bring everyone whole and keep the $500,000, and those two things aren't married.
Okay. I would like to see it brought up back up to a whole, because it's a big impact. It's really not, I think it comes up to a little over 70,000 to bring those up whole. It's a huge impact, especially on those organizations that are also coming out of the COVID year, finally getting their fundraising back again. So I think it's huge. And that little bit of money goes a long way. Additionally, I think we have hit the budget. We have such a surplus right now, which is a lot of the conversation LTAC was having of how do we maybe give a bump on some of these things? And there was discussion too, but we want to bring back to council is there any of these that we would want to elevate, even if it's slightly, maybe because some of these applications, they vary quite a bit, and whether it's the quality or, showing the math and like the heads and beds are over 50 miles. So I think there's, that's something for a go forward for that group to work on the committee of how do we do this, how do we determine what amount, but I still want to talk, I guess, on the Harbor History Museum. That's the other part we haven't talked about.
Yes. If I could just quickly follow up on what you said, I've had the opportunity now to meet with most of our hoteliers that are on the LTAC as well as some of the receivers. Also with input from Laura, noting that LTAC may have been different the past or the last 4 years. And so we're kind of wanting to re-up what that is, what information is given, and how much input they can have. Laura's come up with a great idea of having a quarterly tourism summit where she brings LTAC and the receivers together to kind of talk about what we're doing, how we're being, how we're responding to the requests of the collectors, their needs, and as part of the city's application in an effort to be more responsive and transparent with how our city funds are being spent. Additionally, noting that Laura is split 50-50 between communications and tourism, want to make sure that Laura is able to be successful in that role of making sure that both of those get those time. And so we're looking at, and Laura has great data and ideas to come back with, okay, LTAC funded these applications last year. These are the ones that provided their necessary paperwork back so that we have a tracking on if we're giving someone funding, we know that they spent it properly and we received the information.
And to be quite clear too, last year was one of the first years we've had actual data with 2020 cancellations, and 2021 data really isn't that complete either because we did have additional shutdowns. I do want to just route back to Councilmember Dunson's point too. We have data in front of us now too, and we've looked at 21, we've looked at 22. And I think one of the difficulties within LTAC granting those awards is saying, is this effective? Is this an effective use of the funds? And to your point earlier, you know, it is about increasing heads and beds, it's about increasing tourism from 50 miles away. We have the capacity to run reports and draw essentially a polygon around the space where an event is held and see how many people are coming in, people were 50 miles away, what their demographics are, if they're also seen in other parts of hotel, you know, in our hotels, if we can correlate them with spending money throughout town, or if we have more of a local draw. And that's not to say that any of these events are not wonderful, great parts of our community, but when we look specifically at what the fund is supposed to do, we're measuring that return. And to have data in front of us to inform our LTAC members and to inform you as council to say, is this money doing what it's supposed to do, is really what we've been working hard on. Without data, obviously, that's a hard thing to say. It's more of a feeling like, did I see somebody there at a restaurant? Maybe it had an impact. And to be quite honest, there have been events that we funded that have not put through the required reporting at the end of the year. And I can't make numbers up for them, obviously. When we put toward our jailer reporting together, there were several items that say, like, you can estimate how many people you think you brought in. And that's also not hard data. So when we looked at the reduction to across the board to some of these events, it wasn't a value judgment. It wasn't saying that these people deserve less funding or you know, we recognize that there is some difficulty with COVID, but we really have to route back to how are these funds performing? What are they doing for the purposes that they're intended for? And that is where the difficulty comes when we see the numbers that have mostly a local draw. Doesn't mean it's not a valid program or a great thing, but is it community oriented or is it tourism driven? And that's our big question.
Yeah, I think there's some value too, and some of these different, you know, groups, I think everybody's seen the list of them, but even some of them have this, like, it's probably not why they're traveling from 50 miles away, or maybe they're not staying overnight, but they're things like, they're gonna go do 3 of these different things. They're gonna hit the farmer's market, Harbor Wildlife, and maybe they go to the museum. It's kind of a collective that can bring people. So that's the other difficulty out of looking at these. I think other, and Laura, you and I have talked about this, but other opportunities are looking for things that are like off season, that, you know, when like the hotels and all that are not at capacity already. That becomes like a greater benefit to restaurants, other businesses besides the hotels.
And the sports complex.
Sports complex off season.
You know, soccer,
fields.
I never remember playing soccer when I was in Reading, so, you know,
Right.
I was just gonna make a point about, it would be great to see data numbers, you know, some type of scoring matrix to the applications, kind of like you do. And it sounds like that's in the works in those conversations, but, you know, instead of hearsay to actually, okay, like when you apply for culvert funding, so these are the scores that you got, and here's where you are on the list, and here's the priority of the list. You know, how do we show that this is green, because this is tax dollars, so I'm like, okay, so are we putting it in the right places? Is there, you know, a dynamic that makes it more level? I'd be really interested in seeing that.
And I would say too, this is the first year we'll have a full set of data to go into. So in 23, we can review 2022 data and say, these are the people that came here. These are the total number that was produced. And we can perhaps take a look at that. And, you know, I'm happy to have maybe even data by come in and talk a little bit about data science and how those numbers are put together, because I know there's some questions around that. They're very, very accurate. So looking at that to say what really moved the needle here is very important, but this next year is going to be our first opportunity to say, here are the numbers, let's review these in advance, and perhaps even also integrate something like reports from our hotels or other places to stay, the other places that generate LTACs.
and report on that to the group of people that were asking to make these
Yeah,
recommendations.
Right, exactly,
Yeah,
like,
that's what-
like, and maybe including the fact, did you report after
Yes.
last year, your end of your data, when you get 5 points if you did it really well, and you get 1 point if you did it, but
Zero
it's
if you
not accurate, or, you know, putting some type of equalizing.
It seems to me there's.
Well, Councilmember Barbara was next. Sorry, I know, we're kind of in a round robin, but
I know.
maybe we can raise hands on this particular one, just to. Yes, yeah, thank you.
I would really like to see what we're talking about as far as quantifying both the application, the scoring, and then the results. But we can't do it retroactively because we didn't ask for it.
Right.
So my suggestion is that we restore the funding to what LTAC had suggested. And if we have some left over that we can give to the sports complex, I think that's a really good idea, but I think we need to restore the funding to the local nonprofits. And then we need to make it really clear what the expectation is for 2023. And that, I don't want to say there's no more guessing, but there is no more guessing. You know, you need to have some accurate data to report. And we will be evaluating it next year based on that accurate data.
So with that recommendation, we would be at about an ending fund balance of 276,900. With the funding restored with the sports complex money,
500,000.
with the 500,000. We would get an ending fund balance of,
Katrina, is this like kind of a one-time thing with the sports complex, or are we seeing this ongoing where we get into parks development?
well, that's a really good question. You know, in the budget, we're requesting money for phase 2 for a feasibility study. And, you know, as the complex develops, there's an increased probability of usage of tournaments that could benefit LTAC. And so staff may come back and recommend additional funding at a future date to that, specifically if we're able to link those two together. So I would say that this is currently a one-time thing, but it may end up being an additional ask later.
Thanks. Sorry, I know I cut mine. Sorry. I was just- it was on that last question. So I wanted-
That's fine, that's fine, that's fine. So 276, what?
276,955 approximately. 276,900.
So that's a 717 plus 500,000. minus-
So I'm very much in favor of what Mary Barber suggested of making them whole. And I'm very, very much in favor of Laura having these summits quarterly with these groups so that they don't get surprised at the end of the year and it's made very plain to them what we need in order to give the money.
You know, I'm not sure that the LTAC, I mean, we can obviously do that and present that as part of that, but a tourism summit would be covering where we're spending our advertising, what we're doing, how we can get information from all parties on promoting what's happening in Gig Harbor.
But I mean, I think that whoever's going to be applying for this, they should have maybe a quarterly meeting as well. Don't just surprise them at the end of the year that this is what we're gonna need from you at the end of the year. Let them have a
We need
meeting
to
with them
pipeline
either
with them.
quarterly or once
Yeah.
during the year. Let them know what the changes are coming and we really are serious about, we need some figures and data from them.
Yeah.
Our reporting structure has always been the same for the funds, and Josh has done a remarkable job of including that and making sure that it's very, very clear as to what we need, even if it is a guesstimate of how many people were. So it's always been the same on reporting. I think if we put forward that these are the metrics that we will use in
Yeah.
order to evaluate the success of
Yeah.
an event.
20 points for.
Yeah, they need to know that.
And again, it's not necessarily that we need to make a decision based on those numbers, but having a data informed perspective in order to have that conversation on what's performing, I think is important.
Right.
So
I think it helps align the committee too, and looking at like it's like apples and oranges of these applications.
Yeah.
sometimes, and we're all using different ways of scoring it, and then, it's really whatever number they put out, it's like the first step in negotiation, right? Of like, is it, this $100,000 or should it really be? And someone else, maybe another organization is doing something to greater value that's
It makes it
So-
more objective.
yeah.
Yeah.
it-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That was, sharing it, that was like, learning how this thing works. I was kind of like, oh, tell me, this is how we're doing it. That's,
You did a fabulous job.
like, if we're gonna use somebody's opinion, let's use mine. Let's look at like the data, right? And so. Hey, it's not- it's what it is.
Councilmember Denson, I believe you were next.
No worries. I agree with everything that has just recently been said. But I think we need to be tougher in the future, and we can be tougher when we have the data. I love the scoring idea, because then we're not thinking about, oh, I love this event. No, we're thinking about exactly the data. Is it during the shoulder season? No points for that. How many people does it put in beds or draw from 50 miles away? Because, I mean, honestly, again, they're all great, but some of these events I really question about whether they're bringing in tourists, and rather they're probably just great community events. And we're not talking about huge chunks of money within any of one of these, but there's some events here that I think have huge potential to actually be huge tourist draws. And I will just mention the film festival as one of them. So maybe if we could take, $1,000 from here, or $500 from here, from these events that really, I kind of feel like we're just throwing our money away, and put it into an event like that, or some of these others that really have potential to grow and be huge tourist draws, I think that we will get a bigger bang for our buck. And so I really urge us to be, I think we made progress from last year, but I think we can be a lot tougher. And, honestly, not everybody should be getting a grant award, and that's not the way it works in the real world, and unless they really deserve it.
And again,
Criteria.
a performance-based metric is incredibly important to say, it is you what it's meant to do.
The other thing that I would like to suggest, because of, as I understand it, the way the committee functions, it has people who receive funds as well as people who give funds on it. And so I would like to suggest some sort of a scoring system where the committee does scoring ahead of time and sends it to a third party, so that there are scores that are done before there is discussion and lobbying, and then there can be scores afterwards too. But I think there should be some sort of if we have a scoring system that says that you get 20 points for putting 50 down, heads of bet, I'm making that up, but then if it's done ahead of time, my experience is that you get a less biased, I should say, result. And I'd like us to look at something like that, sure.
So it sounds like a little bit more structure and accountability for the funding, which aligns with a lot of what we've been hearing from LTAC members, and also Laura has been advocating for as well. And so we will definitely work for that. And it sounds like we have agreement from the council members here to restore the funding.
Well, wait, can you tell me exactly what we're restoring? Because there's a couple different columns here. We've got amount recommended by the LTAC.
That would be the
Is
restoration.
that the
Right.
restoration, which doesn't include, let's make sure that we're clear, the extra money for the Harbor History Museum.
Yes, Lauren is going to talk about that.
Okay,
Sure.
all right.
So that is also a reallocation. So, and city administrator can also speak to this a little bit more. I want to see where we're at there. That is shifting that spend. So as you can see, the amount recommended by LTAC is $40,000. We put this at $70,000. That shifts that $30,000 for public benefit and support into LTAC rather than general fund.
Out of the general fund into LTAC funding.
I'd like to see them get the 70. Instead of 40.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? You have all the options. You could do 40, you could do 70, you could do 30. You
And
could,
again, that's just the shift from general fund into LTAC. So
And
it's
that's,
just
and
a
that's for
additional
what?
bucks.
From just marketing at the museum?
it's marketing, exhibits, and operations.
And that they awarded, LTAC awarded $40,000 for over the course of 2023.
They requested 163,380. Their previous funded amount was 11,500, and LTAC recommended 40,000.
If I recall correctly, part of why their larger ask was there because, at the end of our, we have the year agreement, kind of helping them get started was maybe coming to an end, so they put a bigger ask. Is that right? Did I get that right?
I don't know. No.
Okay.
So it sunsets at the end.
But it was a little bit of a, well, if
Yes,
it's this,
agree.
then maybe it's not LTAC, but maybe it does come out later, so I think they're kind of asking in two ways, hoping for one.
So they were, I think they know that the 30,000 was what they're not getting, or from the general fund that was gonna come out of this. And the additional funds were to market to over 50 miles or within 50 miles.
Over 50 miles.
Over 50 miles, and that's what that was gonna be for, to bring it up to 70, I think. I mean, I think they wanted the full amount, but I'm in favor. since they're not getting the 30,000 from the general, they need that for income to make it free to the public. So then they would only be getting 10,000 to help with marketing. And so I would like to see them get the 70,000, not the 40,000.
I think I understand this now. They're not getting the 30,000 out of the general fund for admission, so they can
Right.
use this for conceivably.
Yes.
Yeah, from all of our review from the whole leadership team, it fits better under LTAC rather than being a general fund expenditure. And that's something that we want to continue to work with the council on when folks or organizations ask for money. We want to ensure that we're able to provide that guidance to council on if you would like to fund those things, where the money best comes from, because it does set up an expectation and then a potential precedence for future and other folks coming in asking for money. So we just want to make sure that we're aligning that properly.
Is that hard for, is that difficult for groups who have been getting, for example, for the History Museum, and they've been getting this for entrance, for it's free, to make it free entrance for everybody who comes to the museum, without having to go to the well every year, instead of having that previous 5-year agreement from the city? Does that make it more difficult for them? Or, and I don't know if we have any other groups that would qualify to have a contract with the city, but does that make it more difficult?
I think, go ahead. I believe it would make it easier organizationally for them, because they have a known pot of money that are coming in. I will note that the city does not provide this level of funding to any other organization. We do provide, $1 a year leases to some of our other nonprofits, but there's not another nonprofit that we provide a sum of money for their operations like this outside of LTAC.
Or, okay, because we give the downtown waterfront association a large amount.
Correct. And so we just want to make sure that, from now on, when we're looking at giving these pots of money, that we're looking at where it comes from and also looking at potential future ramifications of that funding. Not saying that it shouldn't happen, right? But saying that we need to be, strategic and of how we're doing it and where it's coming from.
Because that makes their ask bigger then. If they're going to have any specific exhibits, then they would have to ask for the entrance fee and the exhibit.
Correct.
Okay.
And just on a procedural note too, if they were to have these funds through LTAC, you can't have a 5-year agreement. It would have to be a application each year. So
Right. That's what I was asking, because they had a 5-year agreement before, I believe. And so now that's over, and I just wondered if it was more difficult for them to come.
It will be more difficult for them. But again, I do think that based on information that they provide, they could make that case to the LTAC committee and to council in the budget.
Okay, thank you.
And my other just comment on it too is, and the History Museum is obviously a unique place, right? It's a museum, it's like the farmer's market, where of course it's free, right? You just walk through the park. But in looking at the application and knowing, seeing their financials and things, it was really interesting seeing really what the cost is per person, how many people are actually going there, and it was substantial. If they had to be charging versus what they're getting from grants or from the city or from donations, or maybe you remember the number, I don't have it in front of me, but it was very high. I want to say it was over $30 a person. And it was just so to be sustainable, and it would be really hard for them, even charging $5 for somebody to get in, which most people probably wouldn't think anything about. It's not even taking care of, really the operating costs. So.
And they don't have a big staff.
No.
So they're just.
So it's no cut or dig on the History Museum. I love what they do, and I think, definitely been able to help them a lot, but I think, a lot of times, these groups also have to look for things that generate money, allow them to operate, thrive.
Feedback. Okay, so with that, again, it sounded like there was a recommendation to go to make everyone whole again, and as was aptly pointed out, there was a change in the request for the History Museum to add that 30,000 for the admission onto the LTAC. So,
Was there consensus from council on making that 70,000 for Harvard?
Yeah, let's do it one at a time. That's easy. So, yeah.
What do you mean one at a time?
That's
there's
the
other-
final one. I mean, I think that's the
So
final
when we
one.
say make it full, is it the amount recommended by the LTAC?
Yes.
Yes.
So we're not gonna be giving downtown Front Association 100,000, we requested 20, well, 20 and 10. That's what I'm trying to get at. I gotta add the numbers up so I know what I'm voting for.
Okay, so
when
I
we
guess
say-
the motion would be that we would go with the LTAC recommended amount. Except for the city ask would be the 975 to include the 500,000 for the sports complex. For downtown waterfront alliance, we would do $100,000 based on what Laura indicated, and that again goes to the previous council decision for their funding. And then
So,
70,000 for the Harbor History Museum.
Can I make one point? There is a thing on here, the Hurricane River Foundation Summer Sips, formerly the Cider Swing. That was April, May into June this year.
Returning to Gig Harbor next year, they did not apply for funds. last year.
Okay, so it is specific. I was just worried that it wasn't occurring in Gig Harbor.
Technically,
Question came up to me.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
technically, according to MRSC, they could have an event that was just outside of city limits if it brought tourism to the city in. But that's a real stretch.
Yeah.
Yeah. from
It's come as a stretch.
Honestly,
A
that's
lot
why-
of, maybe not.
Well, that's why I was really encouraging, folks on the Key Peninsula to apply. Because there are no hotels on the Key Peninsula, so if if they're drawing people, people are gonna stay in Gig Harbor, enjoy our restaurant, walk downtown, and we go to the farm tour. I'm like, I think that's a real boon, whatever they do out there for us to support that. And so I see the farm tour too. Yes, that's happy to do that. Anything we can build out there will benefit us. Whereas Tacoma, not so much, because they're not gonna come further.
Right.
But they've gotta go through Gig Harbor. to get to Key.
Did that wrap up meet council needs for LTAC funding?
Yes, and is that the fund balance total, is that still the 276 that
No.
you gave us? No, so it's different
If
now.
we restore all of this and we take, the downtown waterfront alliance from 30 on this to 100, then that's an additional 70,000 there, and then.
But
an
which
additional-
100 is on here
There.
in this column,
Dave
so it
has
was
it
already
on the-
removed.
Oh,
Did you put that up there, Dave, or is that?
So does that 75,000 come back? So does it go back to LTAC?
Oh, I'm
Does it
sorry,
go back,
I see.
Or does it go back? to
sorry.
the
I
city
didn't
fund?
have that.
And it's a great question, and
So
I've asked,
it seems like a transfer then.
and I've asked Dave this,
Okay.
Dave, so when we get the 75% back for the B&O reimbursement, can we take that and put it back into LTAC?
I don't see why not.
I think it should go back into LTAC.
Yeah.
I mean, we're, and
Yeah.
then it really kind of covers all these, bringing them back up to the recommendation too. It's like someone will wash, we got some free money for everybody.
If that's allowed, I think that would be a great.
Yeah.
So we'll have Dave look into that to be triple sure, but if it's legally
Yeah.
possible, then yes, we'll absolutely do that.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
So we'll get 274, 631. Thank you, Josh.
Yes, thank you, Josh, for the updated numbers there.
I was a couple thousand off, I apologize. I don't know how that happened. Josh is smarter than me. So that is,
I'm good with.
we're good with this moving forward.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
Okay.
Great, that would be good. Thanks, Council.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laura.
I would like to suggest a break.
Yeah.
Would you all like 5 or 10?
5.
5? Okay, so we'll do 5. We're gonna say 6. We'll be back at 3:28. Say 6 to give us 30 more seconds. All right. Morning, Josh. Welcome back to the Gig Harbor City Council study session of Thursday, November 3rd, 2022. The time is 3:31 p.m. and we're moving right along to our last discussion item, which is the proposed utility rate increase for 2023 only. And Ashley Emery, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And this report will come to us from our Public Works Director. Can you not? I don't think he can hear us. Maybe
He
not.
can.
Can he?
He was talking to us.
Oh, Ashley, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good, good. Okay, just making sure. Public Works Director, Jeff Leno.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. hopefully you've had a chance to read over this brief memo that we provided. I will first, for those of you who have not met Ashley Emery with Peninsula Financial Consulting, on the screen is Ashley. He has been working with us for more than 20 years on our utility rates. He has a great approach, real reasonable approach to looking at utility rates, but has kept us in the black. So I very much appreciate Ashley being here once again this year. As noted in the memo, the three utilities that we operate as enterprise funds, water, wastewater, stormwater, have to adjust their rates occasionally because of capital expenses, operation expenses, maintenance expenses. We do recommend that we look to have rates adjusted on an annual basis. If we skip years, then it just goes back to haunt us later and we have to make up for it. I have this document I've been slowly keeping tabs on of our utility rates since, well, we can be reasonable about it, but I'll just quickly run through this. And actually, I don't know if you've seen this. It shows up on the screen here. Okay, so I'm just going to run through it. I have water, wastewater, and stormwater on here, but you can see the key is here's the year, the rate, the increase. That increase is big because you go zeros and then you have massive rate increase, many zeros, massive rate increases, and then more zeros and massive rate increases. And this is what we did last time with Ashley. We had 6 years of more consistent, steady increases. So that's water. Here's sewer. It's a very similar look at the rate increases, lots of zeros and then lots of massive rate increases. That's hard for anybody to budget for. That would be hard for us to budget for in our own. And then stormwater is the same way, if not even a little worse. Again, 48%, but it goes up $1. So.
100%.
Yeah, so, but percentage wise, that's big. It's, you can see when we have more reasonable rate increases, that's more tolerable. So, where we are right now is the last time we increased rates was January 1 of 2020 for all three rates, for all three utilities, sorry. And, we held off intentionally then because of COVID. And we said, okay, well, we kind of went the opposite way in COVID. We said, well, even if you don't pay, we're not going to shut you off. And so, but then we were getting out of COVID, and for the 2022 budget, we put money in there to have the general facilities charge review, which is the one-time connection fee, and then the monthly rates review. We had a discussion on general facilities charges, and then things stopped. This got set on the back burner, not as much of a priority, but discussions with Ashley at the end of summer, he made a very good suggestion of, because we were talking about, well, we can't go another year, a third year without doing a rate increase. That will be challenging to catch up on. And he said, well, let's just do an interim or a one-time rate increase now for January 1, 2023, and then come back and finish the study and see where we are with all of our expenses and with our revenues. So that also is going to give us a little bit of time to see how our stormwater utility rates are going to come in now that we did our utility rate study. And we, as of July 1st of 2022, we have a whole new stormwater rate structure based on the hard surfaces. So that's going to give us a little bit of time to look at that data also. So what we're proposing today is to just look at where we are with common factors for costs, cost of living adjustment, consumer price index is what we look at. I'm going to show you on my screen just what some of the numbers we're looking at, and then talk about options, what we have for options. And then when we talk about options, I'm going to hand that off to Ashley. So real quick, change something here.
Yes, John, that goes with the accessibility.
Remember us
improvements.
talking about that.
It's really cool.
Very good.
Okay, so here is a snapshot from Bureau of Labor Statistics, CPI for the Seattle Bellevue Tacoma area. And it just kind of shows how we've grown over the past few years, and specifically what we're looking at. My cursor up there, okay, yeah. So specifically, we're looking at essentially like the February of 2020 through August or so of 2022. The cost of living, the CPI has increased between February of 2020 to August of 2022, almost 14%, 13 point some odd percent. So that's just CPI, that's just cost of living. That isn't specifically the capital expenses, which, as this council unfortunately knows all too well, capital projects are going up at a much higher rate than that. So looking at those numbers and hearing Ashley's idea, we wanted to just present with a few options. So Ashley, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. People can see you. And if you want to talk about what options might be there.
All right. First off, we should start off with just a couple seconds on the overall big picture. Right now, you guys are, from a rate standpoint, are a little bit below the state average on water. You're basically right at the average when it comes to sewer, and the same with storm. So nothing's out of whack. You guys are in really good shape, and that's true for the financial health of all three utilities. Everything is really stable, and there are no giant concerns. So pat yourself on the backs. You guys are continuing to do well. As Jeff says, this is just simply a proactive measure to, we've got a large capital improvement project list of projects over the next 6 years. And so we are going to see some rate increases in a 6-year rate schedule that we will be developing for you. So the question is do we want to just ignore that until it's done, in which case your 6 years are going to have higher annual rate increases? Or do we want to say, listen, we're undergoing some pretty serious financial changes right now, as Jeff pointed out, the darn inflation, and react to that right now. So I'd like to, unfortunately, I'd like to say this is real easy. But let me show you. Let's see. Can everybody see that?
Not yet.
Let's see, how do I? Did people see that or not see that?
No.
Do you have the green share screen button at
There
the
we go.
bottom?
Now I gotta find that. There we go. Good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Gotta love Zoom.
There we go.
Now it's
So
There we go. Oh.
right here is the important stuff. What you have is, as Jeff said, we've got really high inflation going on, but the fact is that doesn't roll through your utilities 100%. Your rates, your monthly rates pay for your operating expenses and your debt. Well, the debt doesn't change due to inflation. So if half of your rate is paying debt, and we did a cost of inflation of the whole thing, then we would be generating twice as much as we needed to from a rate standpoint. The other big one is salaries. If I pull salaries out of your water budget, that's almost $1 million. So half of your budget is going to salaries, and I'd like to think that salaries go up with inflation, but they don't. You have contracts that supersede that, and generally they lag considerably. So from a standpoint of the actual impact, we want to address that and know, actually, well, if we do a 5% rate increase, how does that help us? And in this case, what I've done is I've pulled these out, and just as an illustrative, if I apply a 3% increase to salaries, then we need an additional $30,000. And if I apply an 8% cost of living to all other inflationary, fuel, materials, electricity, then we need another 82,000. So all told, to compensate, we need another 112,000. And that actually works out to be a 4.5% rate increase.
And actually, just to clarify, that 4.5 and the 3%, 8%, those numbers, that's per year? Or is that
Yes.
across? Yeah, okay.
Yes,
And
So-
water bill.
pardon?
Oh, okay, that's what I wasn't sure.
Did you hear that actually?
No, I missed that.
Is it, the numbers you have, that's water only?
This is water. Sewer has a higher debt load. Our debt's almost 1.6 million. So in that case, when we do a rate increase, we need a much smaller. So you can see the same 3% and 8% applied to salaries and then all other expenses. In the sewer utility, we only actually need about 3% to compensate.
Per year?
Stormwater, it's about 4. Now, I don't want to suggest that we know to this kind of specificity, but it would be my recommendation that if you guys just want to, and back up a minute, we know we're going to do rate increases. Those are, we can't have a 6-year schedule without rate increases. There's no way that always works that way. So the question, and some of those are going to be to raise additional revenue, not just meet inflation. So we know we're going to have to do, we know we're going to have to increase our revenues above expenses to pay for some of the new projects. So the question being is, what if anything do we want to bite off now and help us down the road? My analysis indicates that I would do, if all I want to do is compensate for this year's inflation and keep us afloat next year, my recommendation would be to do a 5% on each utility. That will set you up next year when we finish the rate study, that you will have not lost any ground. And on sewer, you will have gained a little bit of ground. So it won't hurt you there. The other option is to say, okay, yes, I know not only are we going to have to compensate for inflation this year, but we're also over the next 6 years going to have to raise revenues. Maybe I bite some of that off now and take advantage of that. And so that's where, if you want to go higher and make the, when we come back to you in 4 or 5 months with a rate schedule, a recommendation, if you want that to be a little bit lower and a little bit more palatable, then every percentage point above 5 you do now, you will reap that reward on the next 6-year schedule.
I'm curious, it's a small number in this whole thing, right? Because most of it comes out to salaries and operations, but on the debt side, like we can see in the water, it's pretty consistent at the 245 range for a while. Is that similar in the sewer and storm? I'm just looking to see if there's any opportunity where.
Storm does not have any, it's got $700 left, but basically zero.
Okay.
Water and sewer are both similar, not in scale, but they both, if you look in a couple of years past the next rate schedule, we start defeasing. Some of the bonds are maturing and retiring. So half of our debt load goes in 2031 on water, and on sewer. A couple of years before that, we sink from 2 million to 1.5 million. And that will provide a serious advantage. We will address that when we look at the next rate schedule, because we can't set things too high in anticipation of that, because you are going to have some good news in the next cycle. But we will take that into account this cycle.
News in 6 years.
Like Jeff said, I've been working with you guys for 20 years. It's one of the, I can actually speak to 6 years does happen.
Yeah.
My opinion on it is I think that we should move at rates that keep us in line, so we're balanced. I don't like the idea of trying to grab more now, just making it softer later. I mean, we've seen impacts the last couple of years of, we're not gonna shut you off or anything, and if you're not, and so I say, stay consistent, cover our budget.
I have a question. Weren't we going to look at those folks who perhaps did not have a strong income? And see about raising that, those folks who needed money? That's right, there was a program, wasn't there? Well, we
Only one, I think,
There-
right?
Yeah,
The COVID relief.
there's two programs. There's the one that we entered into an agreement with Pierce County to help support some of the funding. And that was what was brought to council a couple months ago. And then there's a separate, and maybe this is what you're talking about, Councilor Roof, but there's actually, we have a senior discount.
Right.
And we're looking in, not as part of this ordinance, but as part of our rate study, full rate study that we haven't gotten to yet. But to look at making that senior discount a low income discount and adjusting that low income level.
Right.
But we're not proposing that right now because we're just trying to get something discussed to bring us a little bit further up. And that's where hopefully, when I have more time, it has nothing to do with Ashley. When I have more time, we'll be able to get into that. And I'm hoping that's gonna be December. But we can get into this and then come to council in January, say, and talk about this in depth and be ready to have those types of adjustments made. Our utility billing staff has a whole series list for me to make adjustments to the code, to make it easier for them, more clean, more transparent for the customers when it comes to billing purposes.
So if we make adjustments, though, what happens if we make this 5% now? Because those folks who perhaps we were going to adjust in January, they're gonna pay the 5% now, is that correct?
Yes, they would, but I believe, maybe you know, Dave, but I believe the senior rate is based off of the Pierce County number, not the city number.
Yeah, it's some sort of, I think it's the number for the property tax exemption,
Yeah,
and that's the level we tie it to.
so it's not our number. It's not like
Right.
we're adjusting our utility and then we should match that. But because it's that number that the senior discount is set at is out of our control.
So this is a 5% rate increase for all three utilities, so be correct, not 5% total, 5%
Each utility. is-
So on a,
Per
I mean,
year.
Well, just for 2023
Just for now.
only, and then we would come back in 2023 and have a much broader discussion. Because Ashley, you saw that spreadsheet that Ashley has. When we come back and we look at that, we'll look at that spreadsheet in depth. And we'll spend the time to go through, we'll look at the CIP schedule in depth. And Ashley will be able to show you what options, what if you wanted to increase it by X percentage, well, here's your operating funds, and what will that look like 20 years from now? How will it impact you? And by a click on his spreadsheet, it will come up, it will spread across all of the years. And you can do really good planning based off of forecasted numbers.
So I have a really stupid question, because I'm not a numbers person at all. If we're having a 5%, if we're suggesting a 5% rate increase on 3 different utilities, how much will a residential sewer and water, how much will that bill go up?
5%.
Okay, that's what I thought.
It's not
Okay.
compounded.
Yeah,
For,
so,
for water, you're looking at about $3 a month or by month. So $1.50 a month. And sewer, about $3 a month.
okay. Then my next question is, if we waited to add anything onto that, knowing that we have these capital projects coming, would we be better off saying, say, a 5.5% increase this year? So that we're avoiding having a 7% increase in 2 years when we need to start raising the money for those projects.
Well, that's where it's challenging unless we do more in-depth review
Yeah.
of each individual utility and
Okay.
what the 6-year CIP looks like. This is a stopgap measure
Okay.
to just helpful. Go ahead, Ashley.
It's in big picture terms, doing, if we did a 5% now, because what's gonna happen is when we come back to you, most times we look at a levelized uniform annual increase over a 6-year period as the most palatable to the public. And if that's the approach we took this time, foregoing a 5% rate increase next year, you'd be probably looking at whatever rate increase we needed in the 6 years, you could add basically a percentage point each year to that. So if we came back to you next year and said, okay, we didn't do anything last November, here we're going, here's our 6th year, and we needed 4% a year. If we didn't do anything, we'd need 5. So it's gonna work out about a percentage a year that you're coming down from the maximum that we're gonna have to do.
And that's over 6 years. As opposed to
Okay.
1 year at 5%.
Assuming we agree to this or go in this direction, is there a way we can get this out to the public so they understand? Because everybody's bills are going up on everything, and it's just another thing people are gonna say, gosh, get
Yes,
nailed again. Why? I think it'd be good to get a little bit ahead of it. Put something out there that says, number one, how much it's going to be. And then the next is why we're doing it, trying to save you money later, or trying to save you a huge increase later. I think it's a little easier to take and then have to write that check out a little bit more this month, knowing that I don't have to like double my check in 3 years because we didn't. I think it would be really important.
yes, so we can do that. We can either put the bills or add stuff from the mailer, and in addition to website and social media. As part of a full utility rate study, we have public input. We have an open house. And we will do that once we get some general direction from council early next year. So we'll do a full open house. We didn't want to do a full open house for one.
No, but I think for this, it's important to get out on ahead of
Okay.
it.
Councilmember Wu had her hand up first.
Okay, yeah.
So since we take that money, I'm going back to affordable, going back to low income folks. So since we take that money from Pierce County, that number from Pierce County should be available, should it not?
I don't have it off the top of my head. It is available though,
It's
yes.
on the application.
So could we not, use that number as and if you're below that number, then you don't have this increase, or you get a less or something? I'm trying to come up with a way so that folks with a low income, this is gonna be a tough year for them. Just trying to.
I don't want to violate any procedures, however things are set up, but I know from past work for the city, the amount of money that's associated with the low income senior discount is minimal. So you can, there's, from financial standpoint, from a cash flow standpoint, as I said, if it doesn't screw things up procedurally, it's not going to make a beans difference in the long term if you said, and we're foregoing any rate increase on the low income rate.
I like that.
Does that include people that are not seniors? But other folks under, no.
No, unfortunately, the way the code is set up, and again, not asking to have a full revamp code, but the code specifically, I'm looking at it now, it specifically says low income senior, and the person must be 62 years or older. Or
Okay.
if married, either spouse be 62, so we change that. So you have to change the code.
Yeah, that's what I was just adding on. That's not my question, but I would definitely want to change the code. And I think I was the one that brought it up in your study session earlier to include everybody. Not just seniors,
Right.
be great. I know that takes a procedural step, but how confident are you in the 3% and 8% numbers that you're estimating that 4.5, 3 point something, 3 point something increases to cover costs?
Well, the question is what's programmed for next year for cost of living on salaries?
Yeah.
That is completely either contract or up to you guys, from a pay scale standpoint. Like I said, I just assumed for this discussion that was gonna be around 3%.
Okay.
And the 8% number is,
The 8%, I mean, as you pointed out, we're higher than that, so it's not a,
Yeah, and that's where you came up with the 5%. I was just wondering if we could do less or even considering not at all. Just next year after the open house. But if
I
you-
know from personal experience that these inflationary factors, it's not consistent across the board. I'm seeing some prices come back down already. My side gig is I've got a restaurant, and we've had the 5-gallon drum of fryer oil went from $44 up to a peak of $98. And we're back to 60 in the low 60s now. So there is movement up and down. But that's trying to isolate that for each of your little categorization of expenses, very difficult to do.
Okay, thanks. I was just trying to think of other options.
well, so the next steps are, unless there's general consensus that no rate increase for January 1, 2023. I have on the draft agenda for November 14th council meeting, an ordinance, first reading of an ordinance to raise utility rates across all 3 utilities at whatever general number we're talking about here.
I like that, but can we add Councilmember Luke's comment about foregoing those rate increases for folks that qualify for the senior exemption or the senior discount?
Let me talk to the city attorney about how that would work.
Makes a small
Into the
difference, but
current-
it means something to those. people.
Yeah,
I think
we'll
it's a
be
good idea,
this.
to start at least.
I'll just read. one
So
here.
if Jeff finds out that we can, then he can execute that into the packet on the 14th.
Yeah.
Computer froze for a second. The code, let me read from the code. It says a low income senior may pay a rate equal to 50% of the applicable water and or sewer rate established by the code. So we could probably change that to say that, based off of, well, I'll have to talk to Daniel about what option that would be, but it would be the rate equal to 55%, essentially, is probably what the way it would read. Or sorry, 45%.
45%.
Yeah.
I'm going the wrong way. It's not a
Yeah.
reduction, it's the
Yeah.
rate percent up. So yeah, so I could ask the city attorney if we would just change that section of code to for the category that we have currently.
I think that would be helpful for those people that need it. And if Ashley says it's not affecting our really overall budget,
It would be nice on the utility bills to maybe put a link to the program, that if you're a senior and low income and you need help, that this is available, just to make sure people know who may qualify.
Okay. Is there, am I hearing that I should start on the 14th with a 5% number, along with looking at the senior rate?
Yeah.
Okay,
Great.
all right, we will do that. Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you.
Very
Ashley.
welcome.
That's it.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.
Any other questions for Jeff on this item? Okay, great conversation, great ideas, and if there is nothing else, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. All those in favor, say aye. Okay, and how are we doing?
Wow.
Easy.